Well, hello there. This is Angela, and welcome to another episode of the Your Next Chapter podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Linda Chaousis, a woman in Adelaide in South Australia who is a mentor, a coach, a speaker, and an author. Now, Linda and I have a wonderfully wholehearted conversation about the art and science of creating the life you really want. Linda's made a huge transition from the world of leadership and management consulting into the world of law of attraction and helping people reach their true potential. Now, the sort of topics that we're covering today is looking at the truth in your emotions and looking at a thing called the emotional guidance scale, which I think you'll find fascinating. We're also talking about how you can tune into your intuition and take those baby steps that you need to take when you are transitioning from one thing into something new, a very next chapter concept. We're also looking at an idea about how your brain is your very own search engine and how you can rely on the internal guidance to show you what it is that you really want to create. It's absolutely an enlightening and an uplifting episode, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. So let's get started. Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted business strategy. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. Tune in each week for marketing, mindset, and personal growth strategies, along with inspiring stories from women around the world who are creating new businesses and lives that are personally fulfilling and financially rewarding. If you're looking to create a business and life you love, you're in great company. Let's find out what will unfold in your next chapter. I'm your host, Angela Raspis, and I'm so delighted that you're here.
Hi, I have a really interesting story about how I moved into my next chapter, and I have a feeling many people have found the same thing. I went from a management consultant who was doing a lot of management consulting and a lot of really hardcore strategic planning into more of the mindset, the law of attraction, and really helping people with resilience. And I found it was an interesting transition because for me, to be honest, it was like an 8-month transition because when I moved more to the mindset and the energy, I found that my previous clients kept saying to me, "Oh, but Linda, you're so good at what you do. And oh, now it seems like you've kind of gone off the rails." And so it really took a lot of confidence and a lot of courage and a lot of that inner nudge to know that I was actually on the right path. And now that I've actually unfolded that, I've been doing it for a couple of years. It's been great. And, I'm so glad that I followed that journey. But I know that sometimes when you start your next chapter, it can be a bit wobbly because you feel like some people are saying, "Well, why are you doing that?" And I would just encourage people that if you really feel that inner nudge, I just want to do this, that it's so important to really start heading forward on it.
Oh, that makes me laugh, Linda, to hear people. Are you okay? You've gone off the path.
Oh,
You've gone off the rails.
You've gone off the rails, and it's like, okay, I'll go to the mental health hospital. It's like, but yeah, it was really, and I think many of the people, I know people, and I know that many people in your next chapter group, it's a transition to something very different, and so there are some people that go, what are you talking about? And so I think it does, and part of it's that confidence, isn't it?
I think a huge part of it is that. In fact, one of the things that's come up time and time again with so many women that I've spoken with and surveys that I've run and discussions and groups, etc., have been that self-belief piece is a huge part.
Yeah.
And especially, if you are drawn to move into a new direction, and let's face it, it's later inverted commas in life, this real pull seems to happen so often in our mid-40s. And it's like, I want to go in that direction. And sometimes our family is like, hello. And sometimes, as you experience, some of your clients are like, hello. But that inner nudge, that inner feeling that you were talking about, how do we tune into that? Because it sounds like, well, and certainly in my experience, it's so important to be still and to hear that inner voice. But if it isn't speaking too loudly or with really specific instructions, turn right here, turn left there, sometimes it can be really difficult. So how did you tune into that?
Well, Angela, I've always been someone who has kind of sensed and what I do, because I think that there's a lot around the emotions, and there's what they call the emotional guidance scale, and if you find that there's something that you keep finding that you really feel happy about, or, oh, just sounds so exciting, then that can be a clue to looking into that a bit more in terms of how you can actually start to unfold that. And I just spoke to a group last night about it. And I think that, so I think, I do think it starts with what feels good to you and what doesn't feel good. And I know that, and when I've coached people, a few of them, I've said to them, look, I know that we often have said, oh, don't trust your emotions. No. But actually the emotions are sometimes that first step of, oh, okay, I keep, and it's something that you keep doing. Like, it may be you have one moment of, oh, I'd love to do this, and then you forget it. But if it's something that keeps coming up, I think it's worth considering, thinking about, okay, well, it seems like I love doing this, and I'd like to actually look into a bit more. And for some people, it's on such a different path that it may be just one little step forward. And what I've found is I've taken that one little step forward, then another step and another step. And sometimes it's not exactly on that path, but then it takes me down another path. And, I found that when I moved from, the management consulting and writing management books to more of the law of attraction, and now actually what I'm focusing most on is what you've talked about, is the power of putting yourself first, because I find a lot of it is just first helping people have self-confidence. So I say to people, listen to that inner gut. And you're right, sometimes it's a small little whisper, but pay attention to it and then see what happens. Because if it's a small little whisper and you just start heading in that direction, it will expand if that seems right. And the Institute of Heart Math has done a lot of research around this, and what they say is your brain energy goes out much shorter than your heart energy. And so what they're saying is, your emotions are really your key.
I've actually, the Institute of Heart Math, I remember reading some of their information online, and that concept that we're energetic beings, and we give off, vibes, for want of a better description, and looking at those diagrams showing how far the energy, of our heart actually reaches out. And it was quite amazing to see that, and to actually read, the scientific background. That this wasn't just the woo-woo stuff to, without being disrespectful. It's one of the reasons you and I have spoken so often, is because you've taken law of attraction and the emotions and that type of thing and actually put the scientific slant on it as well, so that we can see that it does have a basis in science, which to me I find really appealing. I like to trust my heart, but I also like it to be backed up as well. So listening to those inner nudges, that's really just a case of, well, actually it entwines with that idea of putting yourself first, doesn't it?
Yes, you're right, Angela. It does, because if you're not putting yourself first and you're letting everybody else kind of crowd in what their opinions are, and you're doing everything for everybody else, and then you're just draining yourself, then that can be, your intuition may just totally just shut down, because it's like, I just need to get better, kind of thing.
So if someone, think of someone that's got like a really busy life, there's a lot going on, they're juggling a lot, there's demands on their time. How do we find that quiet space?
Well, and I when I do speaking engagements, this is the topic they most often ask me to talk about. And one of the things I first say to people, because I think many groups, and I think in particular it's women, I say, first of all, the power of putting yourself first, I think many of you think it's being selfish. And I think, so that's, I think, part of the reason why you think, well, no, I can't take my time to do this. But I think, so I say to them, it's like if we walked around as big, containers of things that, we can help people with, we can give them, it's like if you were like a big container of water. And I said, if you give this to that person, give this to that person, and you're not filling yourself up, then if they keep drinking from your well, and then they have the final drop of water that's in your well, and they're just, I finally got that final drop, and then your well has totally gone dry. And then what can happen is many people will be, they'll be unwell, they'll have, they'll have health that's kind of, wearing down and whatever. So I say, what I think is important is to think about, I say to people, look, I know what it's like, because many times I'm working long hours and I don't have a lot of time, but what I will do is, even if it's just 20 minutes, I have a home office and it's upstairs. So I will come down to what we call the green room, which is, I look outside and see the trees, and I will have a cup of tea, and I will spend 20 minutes looking out the window and just focusing on how much I love the outside. Or sometimes I'll read one of those crazy women's magazines with all the gossip, because it's just shifting my mindset. And I say to people, you can do that for 20 minutes, or you can just rush upstairs, have your cup of tea at your desk, and not give me change. And so I've got the energy balance sheet that I often say to people, write down a few of the things that you could do that will help you improve your energy. And, if you're in an office, you may just walk around, you may just get up from your desk and just walk around the floor, for 5 minutes. Because it's just getting up and shifting, what you're doing, and shifting the stress. And so I think that for many people, I think partially is, well, I can't do that because that's being selfish. But I'm sure and when I've coached people, I said, when you picture what, are you watching TV? What are you doing? Are you talking on the phone? Or even, in my book that I wrote, I actually said to people, look, you may have young children, and so you may not be able to just go into the room on your own, but, have them be playing out in the yard, or be playing in the family room, and just while you're watching them, have a cup of tea and just kind of do some of that mindfulness. And you can still watch your children to be sure they're safe, but a lot of it is kind of going into that mindfulness of being grateful for what you're experiencing, and a moment of presence. And I think that's the first starting point. It can just be 10 or 15 minutes.
I like that, picking up on that, just what you said there towards the end, a moment of presence. And I think this has got so much to do with our thoughts and our attitudes, and what we're deserving of. And that idea of just taking 5 minutes, that's where it can start. Just taking that 5 minutes and allowing yourself to pause. It's a big goal for me at the moment, this idea of finding some stillness, the calm at the center of the storm. And if I'm real about it, I can find those little pieces of time. I can start to prioritize myself. But it is that, I think this is very tied into your sense of self and your confidence about yourself, your belief in your value, and all of that sort of thing. And one of the things that I've certainly seen, which I think is great, again, as we're moving on and getting into our next chapters, we become less concerned about what other people think of us.
Yes.
We can still have self-doubt, but we are less concerned with the opinions of others, which is a bit of a relief. And I think that is, if we can lean into that and understand that other people's opinions of us pausing or taking time or exploring a new idea or starting a new business, it doesn't matter, because we're following what's in our heart. And I'm not saying, bugger off, family, I have no time for you. It's not that. But it is putting myself up the priority totem pole, starting to move myself up that totem pole so that I am not better than or less than or more deserving, but equal to. First, equal is the way that I like to look at it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And what I often say to people is, when I do a talk on that, I say, for many of us, we have moved off the center stage of our life, and it's not about being selfish or arrogant, but we've moved off the center stage of our life, and we've let everybody else crowd it out. Whereas we need to get back on the center stage, and it doesn't mean that we're going to be, the big conceited person, but it's just that we're going to be at the very core of what we want to do and what we see happening. And then also what happens when you build that confidence, you do start to set some boundaries, because you find that some of those people that have actually just keep giving you that information, may not be the most helpful one. And I think that, but there are also people that, you still need to, be around, but it's really about, being polite with them, but also just having that inner confidence that where you're moving ahead. And I think that can be, and I think the more people do that, then the more they find that they get confidence in doing that, because eventually they will draw people to them who love what they're doing. And so they may have a little small group there, which then can actually help them, move forward to what they really want to do.
So it's getting quiet, it's prioritizing yourself, it's allowing the space to start exploring what you're interested in. I'm actually reading a book at the moment, Divine Intuition, by a woman called Lynn Robinson. I'm going to do a review of that in a later podcast. But one of the things she spoke about, which I thought was a great example, was a woman who had hit midlife and was thinking she'd been a bookkeeper all her life and was really getting a bit tired of it and not feeling energized or interested in going into work and doing the job. So one of the exercises that Lynn gave her was just to go through catalogues from a local school in terms of evening college, and just have a look through what grabs your attention. What makes you go, oh, that looks interesting, and start to circle these sort of things and just give yourself permission to explore. But to cut a long story short, what this woman discovered over time was that she was particularly interested in helping women who were in, or people that had been abused and were getting out of domestic violence and these sort of situations. And she ended up in a position where she was teaching financial freedom and management and budgeting and all the type of stuff that she knew as a bookkeeper, but to women in this situation. So her skill base was still being utilized, but the way that it was being used changed entirely. And her energy and her enjoyment, her excitement, her sense of fulfillment, all of that just went through the roof because she was repurposing. And I thought that was really inspiring to hear that type of experience where you can take your skills and you can repurpose them.
Yes, and I think that's true. I think even when you move to the next chapter, which may be a very different chapter, you can still use the skills that you've had in your past. I mean, I certainly still use my skills, in terms of the management. And I mean, I still teach at grad school. So I teach, consulting communications, transformational leadership, and power and influence. And I certainly combine the energetic stuff with the actual, real practical stuff. So I think that's true. I think when people move to the next chapter, it's not like just fully leaving behind everything. I think you can craft it into just the new way that you're thinking, which, whatever you have in your background, it means that you're giving it a different personal brand than other people, which may be the exact type of thing that people are drawn to. I mean, I find that a number of people say to me, Linda, because you've written management books and because you teach at a grad school, I feel comfortable talking to you about the law of attraction because you work on an evidence base. And I think, well, yeah, so that's a group of people that may not have been connected with other people who, didn't have that type of experience.
Absolutely. So the great news here is for everyone who's listening as well, is that nothing we have ever done, no experience we've ever had has been wasted.
That's right.
We're so multifaceted. So all we're talking about here is holding on to and bundling up your experiences, but now looking, where am I being called? Where am I being pulled? It's my time to really explore that. So one of the things that you talk about is how your thoughts and your emotions really connect with outcomes. So you do a bit of demystifying here about the law of attraction in that particular area.
Well, I just think, we are energy and there is an energetic field. And there's a lot of research that talks about our thoughts and our emotions go out on a certain frequency. And when I speak, sometimes I'll say it's about mental rehearsal. It's about self-fulfilling prophecy. It's about the quantum field. You don't even have to call it the law of attraction. So if you're actually thinking about and it's about your perception. So if your viewpoint is a certain thing like, I'm never going to be able to do that. And, everybody else seems to be so much better than this, or everybody else seems to be so much successful in business. Well, if someone keeps thinking that, then that's exactly what they're going to attract, because, their subconscious will say, oh yes, okay, we'll continue to do that. And so I think it's really about, what is and this is why we talk about visualizing, but visualizing, and the neuroscience talks a lot about it. When you actually keep when you keep thinking about a certain direction, then you're forming a new neural pathway. And eventually, if you keep forming that new neural pathway, the old one, kind of the grass grows over it and the path, has become really clear where you're headed. So, I think, and I say to people, look, we're all part of the energetic field. So if you're not paying attention to it, then really think about what it is that you're bringing into your life, because it's often our thoughts and our emotions. And I think our emotions are even more important than our thoughts. So, and I say to people, look, sometimes you might visualize something really specific. Other times you might visualize more what experience you want to feel and what situation you have. But I also say to people, I think it starts with what your purpose is and what your passion is. And I do think, I do think with people, it's connecting to source, and whether you call it God or the universe or whatever, because when you're doing that, and then when you're actually following the thoughts and emotions, then you're actually doing something that you love doing, but you're also serving and helping other people. Because some people can visualize like a Mercedes-Benz, and visualize a beautiful house, but then they're still not happy because they have visualized it because they want to become more respected because they've got these material things. Whereas if you might want to visualize a house by the ocean, and because you love it and your family's going to be there and all that stuff, that's a whole different perspective. So I think, the thoughts and the emotions, to me, it starts with what is the source, what is that that spiritual connection, and what is it you really believe that you're going to serve other people. And usually it's a beautiful circle.
I think those tapping into those emotions, just to focus on that point that you said, because emotions really invigorate our thoughts, invigorate that ability to make things happen. It's the stuff that you really care about, which you're more likely to take action on, to move through discouragement, and just to keep moving forward. So.
Yeah.
That's that you were talking before about the emotional guidance system. Could you just come back to that for a moment and explain how that comes into the idea of visualization and invigorating those visualizations with your emotions?
Well, I think, the emotional guidance system is about, it can go down from the very lowest end of depression right up to, joy. And so if you're at that low level, depression or fear or, whatever those low level emotions are, you're gonna keep stuck in that until you start moving up that guidance scale up to the more positive emotions, which then, because of their frequency, they will start to attract what you want. And sometimes we all go through those periods of discouragement, but what I say to people is, it's really about, you might be down, say, at the lowest level of depression, and then move on up to maybe fear. And that's a step forward. And so it's not just suddenly, whoop, I'm going to go right up to the top. And so it's really thinking about, okay, what are the emotions that you're feeling? And first of all, why are you feeling that way? And often, and this is why I do more about self-confidence now, because often it's confidence. It's like, oh, well, I don't think I'm doing this. And sometimes when people think about, well, I'm really being depressed and frustrated, it may be the people that you're surrounded by, so it's really looking at, what are the things around your life that are causing that. And then as you move on up that scale, you might think about, okay, well, so I'm not happy with this. What is it that I really want to do? And so picture that. And that's the contrast exercise that Esther Hicks talks about, that, and I use this a lot. If there's something that I'm discouraged at, or I feel like it's not working, I'll say, okay, I certainly don't want to live in this place. And I write it down on a piece of paper on the left-hand column. What are the things that I'm finding are really frustrating or challenging or discouraging? And then what are the things that I really want to do? And when I start writing about the things what I really want to do, then that already starts to make you get out of that really, that total frustration, and moving up a little bit of a step, like, oh, okay, maybe I could do that, or maybe I could do that. So, it's a very important part of it, because again, it's all about those frequencies. And I think that, as you move on up, when you've got those positive emotions, emotional contagion, the emotional intelligence talks about, you draw people to you based on your emotions, because it's a vibration that goes out.
It's funny that whole concept of vibration is something that when I was first moving into my own next chapter and starting to explore these type of things, instead of just the strategic marketing background that I'd been mired in for years, I was a little resistant. And then I started to think about it. And even just a simple example, like when you go to an event or a party or a gathering, and you're naturally drawn towards some people and not to others. And as I read more about that, I couldn't deny that was true, that there was like an energy, a vibe, or whatever that gave off that I found really attractive. So I was drawn to speaking to those people, and other people I wasn't. So that was just that I was in resonance with them. We were, to use the expression, vibrating at the same sort of level. And then there was that natural attraction. I want to know that person. I want to talk to that person. So I couldn't deny that part. And then when I started looking a bit further, and you've certainly helped here when I've read your book, Beyond Positive Thoughts, and understanding how much control we have over this. I love that contrast exercise of, well, I'm not enjoying this, So rather than just continue to do that thing, we can actually pause and identify what we'd prefer instead. Now, you can be silly and think, okay, I don't enjoy driving a 20-year-old car and I'd rather drive a Mercedes. I mean, we're not talking about that. We're talking about initially the things that we can change. And it can be as simple as our surroundings. Like I think of sometimes when I'm working at my own desk and I'm having a really hectic day, I'm not enjoying this. So I will go and work somewhere else in the house. And even that small change can lift my emotions a bit, and you're starting to feel a little bit better immediately. So we've got a lot of control and a lot of influence on how we're feeling, and we can make those changes pretty quickly.
Yeah, and Angela, but I've also found there's some people who will tell you stories about, they're driving a 20-year-old car and they really don't, they can't stand it because it keeps breaking down and everything, and they'd like a new car, and they might even picture the car they want, and then if they keep picturing that, then some people have given some great stories of how, the car has come into their life and it's like, oh wow, this has been fantastic. So, so I think it's about, what is it that you really want to experience? And I think that it's that thing about, if you're just at the material level, then it will become empty. But I think if it's at the whole integrated level, it can be a wonderful way of actually, just further expanding into the areas that you want to go into. And I think that you're right. Excuse me. I think we resonate. We certainly resonate when we go up to certain people, and also like when you mentioned, when you read something, what resonates with you and what doesn't. Because the words have energy that come off the page. So, and I think that it's a really good point about. So you go to an event and you're attracted to certain people. You talk to them, and there are just some people that you think, I'm just not really that interested. And I think part of it is to just actually have that confidence to say to yourself, well, you know what? Then these are the people I'm drawn to. So these are the people that I'll spend time with, and then not feel like, oh, I must be bad. I must be this, because I think that's sometimes what people do. It's like, oh, well, why didn't I, talk to these other three people? Well, but you were attracted to the right people for the right reasons.
You're attracted to your people, and that's in the world of marketing and client attraction. We talk about you can't be all things to all people, because you end up being nothing to no one.
Yes,
and so
right.
We recognize that there are clients that we are here to serve. I recognize very much these days the sort of women that I am best matched to take care of in the business mentoring sense. And people that I don't resonate with, that's fine, because there's somebody else that is supposed to be working with them. And we have to trust that. We have to trust our emotions, I think, is the big step that we're really talking about here, is learning to trust what we're feeling, learning to be true to ourselves. And that, I think, at first can be a little challenging, because we have tended to put our families and other responsibilities ahead of ourselves. I think that's why, well, that's certainly what I'm hearing is one of the points that you're making of why it's so important to give ourselves that first equal status, so that we can legitimize what it is that we're interested in. And it's okay, because those emotions that we have really invigorate our thoughts. And when they're invigorated, there's a much greater chance of us actually making things happen.
Yes, and what I found recently is, over the last couple of years, there were various groups of people that I'd be involved with, various people, I'd meet for dinner and that kind of thing. And then it just seems like I've kind of moved beyond that. And so what I've had to do is to say to myself, well, you know what? That was a period of time. And so it doesn't mean I have to keep trying to, kind of push connecting with the people. It's like, no, that was a period of time. And now I've moved on to a different level. They've moved on to a different level. But at the time we were together, it was great, and we really helped each other. But then you've got to kind of know when, okay, that chapter has ended, even in terms of the people you're spending time with, and now we'll move on. Still keep in touch with them, but it's like, well, now it's not the same way that we meet and we connect. So I think that, and you really, when I think about what we've talked about, a lot of it does start with confidence, doesn't it? It starts with really trusting yourself and trusting who you are.
It does, for sure. And I think a part of that is the baby steps to go from I'm not sure, I'm not convinced that I can make these changes, I'm interested in moving in that direction, but who knows if I can actually make this work. I mean, what we're really saying here is just take the baby step. Take the first step.
Yeah.
You can't see the whole picture. So if this idea in your next chapter is of realigning your business or starting something new, just start small. And then
Yeah.
when we take those baby steps and we it turns out okay, we build our trust muscle, and then we can take the next step, and then we can take the next step. So I think that's really important to know, that you don't have to change the world overnight. You don't have to change your world overnight. You can just start taking these small steps towards what is drawing you in, what is connecting with your emotions and appealing to you.
And, you know, one of the stories that I heard from Cheryl Richardson, which I think is a really good example of this, is there was a woman, she was a single mom with 3 children, and she's working full time. And she really wanted to write poetry. And, you know, I saw Cheryl coached her on TV. And so the woman said, but I have no time. She said, I'm a mother of 3, working full time, and every other hour of my day is spent either getting dinner or, helping the school or that kind of thing. And so, but she said, I really would love to write poetry, but I just can't do it now. And so Cheryl Richardson said, well, what could you do? What if you could spend a half an hour every week just writing poetry? And she said, surely there'd be a half an hour in there. And, you know, as they talked about it, she said, well, yes, probably, maybe even while I'm at my children's sporting event, you know, I could sit there and, you know, write something, or, you know, while they're off to school, I could maybe just spend a half an hour writing poetry. And so she did that. She did just 1.5 hour a week. And I think that was such a good example, because all of us can fit a half hour in a week, because there would be things that we're doing that we could actually, you know, spend time doing something different. And sure enough, she did that. And so what happened was, then she loved it so much, she found other time. And so, you know, it went to an hour, it went to a couple of hours, and then she started to present her poetry at the library. And then, you know, I think she ended up writing a book. But I think that, to me, that's such a great example of, we often feel like, oh, I'm really too stressed. I'm too stressed with my family and I can't do this. But if you actually start to just open up a little crack of time, then it will expand, because you love so much doing it. You will actually find time, because you'll actually replace something else with what you love doing, because you find that something else isn't necessarily something that you really have to do.
Oh, I think I'm hearing that. We need to put a challenge out. So if you're listening now and there's something that you're wanting to do, a new direction that you're wanting to move in, then just give yourself 30 minutes a week. Find that little slot of time, that little crack in the time that you can then expand gradually. We'd love to hear what it is that you're exploring. So you can always come across to the Your Next Chapter Facebook group and share that with us. So there's your challenge today, is look for that 30 minutes in your next week where you can take the next step. But another thing, Linda, you talk about with this, the law of attraction. I mean, the overall concept is that what you think about consistently and take action on, you're going to attract towards you. What part does gratitude play in this overall concept?
I think it's in some ways, I think it's the beginning. And I think that, you know, and I mean, we all go through up and down, you know, times. And I think that the time, and certainly if you're sometimes if I'm going through a discouraging period, I will think, okay, let me just think about what it is that I'm grateful for. And I will, you know, I might look outside and say, you know, I love our backyard. I love the fact that, you know, we can drive down the street and not have, you know, crazy drivers. And, you know, so sometimes it's just those everyday types of things. But, and again, gratitude, as you put it out there, and especially as you put it out there with emotions, then you're actually, you're unlocking that little sliver of positive energy that will come into you. And I find that, you know, when I do that, like if I'm going through a discouraging time, I find that when I go back to the gratitude, and sometimes, you know, you may be in a very difficult situation, but it's looking at, even in that situation, what is it that you're grateful for? And, you know, it could be that, you know, you've had, you know, I know my husband 4 or 5 years ago, he had a really bad accident, a rear ender, and he was really quite in a lot of pain. And then 3 other people, you know, over the next 2 or 3 months, had 3 other accidents that people kind of hit the car. And the lawyer said that often happens. And so, you know, he was in a fair bit of pain. Our car was 4 months in the repair thing, but we thought, okay, yep, he's in a lot of pain. But what we were grateful for was that he still was able to walk and all that stuff. He was not in the hospital, like on IV with, you know, not being able to talk and all that stuff. So we looked at it and said, yes, okay, it's been a terrible situation, but we look at, yep, he's still, talking, walking, going to work. So that situation, even though he was in a lot of pain, we still looked at, okay, but you know what? You're still able to be going to work and doing that kind of thing. And so, and some people said, oh, but Linda, that's ridiculous, but Jim and I both said no, because the more we looked at that, then the more things started to move forward. And so I think even if there's a very, really serious situation, if you can look at what is working, then that can be helpful. Even if you have a family member who's quite ill, which nurse and doctor is the one that's so friendly and helpful? And I think as you think about that, you're expanding that. So I think gratitude is a big thing. And if you can at the end of the day, before you go to bed, just think about 3 or 4 things that you're so grateful for and put the emotion into it. Then what a lot of people have said is if you do that about 45 minutes before you go to bed, then your subconscious is going to actually process that, as opposed to maybe some of the other work or whatever that you were going right up until you're going to go to bed. And it's like, oh my word, I'm dreaming about, the report that I've got to write.
I think my experience with gratitude is extremely tangible. When I moved into the recovery area almost 10 years ago now, one of the things that was first advised to me was to get grateful. At the time, I wasn't feeling very grateful. It was a really dark and difficult time in my life. But what happened over the years, literally, I'd say probably 90% of the time I write a gratitude list at night. I've got books and books and books of gratitude now. But what it's done, even on a bad day when it was like, well, the sun came up, that's pretty much the only thing I'm grateful for today. I've got a bed to sleep in. It was really hard some days. But what it did is that it filtered my brain for the good. It made me start to look for the good. And when you repeatedly focus on those things that you are grateful for, you start to notice more of them. And that is definitely, when you're in that vibration of gratitude, you just feel better. I mean, I'm not talking Pollyanna, right? I have, crap that happens like everybody else, but it is that ability these days to be able to hone in on and connect to the positive, the potential positive in this situation that allows me to be more energetic and more positive, and that can only have a good effect on everything else that's happening. It's been a long exercise, many, many years, but I just started with that. What am I grateful for today? And that really helped. I loved how you were speaking earlier about the concept of the neural pathways. If I start thinking down this pathway consistently, I'm actually creating this new sense of self, this new way of being in the world. And I think that's one of the things that certainly happened with using a gratitude list.
Well, I mean, positive psychology has research around that, saying that, they've done brain scans when people have gone into more thinking about what they're more grateful for. When they first did the initial brain scan, some of those negative things would light up in the part of the brain. And as people were more and more involved in the gratitude, they found that those parts didn't light up as much, and the gratitude stuff lit up more. So, it's that whole thing about, and I think that's, what we have to realize is the whole physiology, the whole body, the way it works is, it's not just some little, oh, I'm just doing this to make it feel good. It's like, no, it actually goes into our DNA, and it actually does impact, how we feel, what we're doing, how we're attracting it. I remember Mr. Rogers, he was a children's show when I was growing up. And, one of the things that he talks about is, no matter what tragedy there is, look for the helpers. And I remember I wrote a blog post about that when the Malaysian Airlines crashed, because we had people on Facebook going, oh, I'm never going to fly again, and this. And I thought, and so I wrote, look for the helpers. In that crash, it was a terrible crash, but look for the helpers. There were helpers. And even in all those floods that happened a few years ago, look for the helpers, because the community was forming, and there were a lot of people out there to really help people. People were helping people, go into their homes. And I think that, and so, what he was saying is, it's not like you just ignore the tragedy, but if you look for the helpers, and what that does is it starts to open up the things that you're grateful for, and then you can go back and you may need to deal with some of those serious tragedies, but then it gives you a different perspective.
Yeah, and perspective is everything. Well, it seems just as we're coming full circle on the conversation, there's concepts there that we've discussed that need further exploration. And I will put some links into the show notes about the Heart Math Institute, about your own book, about some of the other pieces that we've talked here, in particular the energy scale, etc. But let's just have a little bit of a recap, because there's some real practical steps that you can take. You can start taking right now. That energy scale, I think that understanding of what it is that can just lift you up to the next part of the scale. We're not talking to go from zero to hero overnight, but just it could be that you play music. It could be that you bring flowers into your office. It could be that you phone a friend. Something that will lift you up to the next layer of the energy scale. I mean, we can start doing that straight away. So I'll make sure we put a wee diagram so people can see what it is that we're talking about there. The contrast exercise, if I'm not happy here or this isn't working here, what would I prefer? Is it that simple with that contrast exercise, Linda?
Yes, because if you, I mean, I guess in some ways, some people might say, well, how simple is that? It may not be, probably simple might be the wrong word, but if you're not happy about something, then there's usually a flip side of, this is what I'd really like to do. And, it might be, I'm not happy in the finances. Some people might say, I'm not happy in my relationship. Well, okay, if that's the situation, what is it you'd really like to do? Because usually there would be another side of that continuum. And so, write that down and then just see, and even just writing it down, often that actually starts to help you think, oh, okay, so there's other possibilities.
There's a concept here that I've taught and shared with my own audience as well, which is skylight thinking. Because I love the way that our brains work, just on this note, that if we're in that place of, I'm not happy, this isn't working, this is not something that I want, that's really got that negative, that heavier energy around it. But if we ask, our brains love to provide answers. They love to close gaps. That's the way we're wired. So if we actually ask our brain the question of how we can change or improve this, it actually starts giving us ideas. So I've talked about that as being skylight thinking, to open a skylight in your head. Okay, so I'm not enjoying doing this type of work. Okay, so instead of saying, why is it so hard, we actually flip that and say, what could I do to make this more enjoyable? And ideas will start to flood in if you allow yourself to actually flip it, as you're saying, to look at the contrast. So again, that's just a small thing that you can start doing right now. If you're aware of something isn't working, flip it, ask the other side, and allow your brain to start to suggest ideas to you.
Yes, because a few people have said, and I think Tony Robbins is one, said it's like turning your brain into Google. So if you keep talking about the negative stuff, that's what you're going to search. That's what your brain will start to find. The brain will keep searching for those negative things. But if you start to say, oh, well, I wonder what I could do, your brain will start to thinking about some of those other positive things that then you think, oh, maybe I'll give that a try. So, yeah, I think that's really true.
Even that description, you can feel the lighter energy around, oh, I wonder what. And it's like, it's what if up type thinking.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I like that. We've got our own internal Google. So look inside before you start looking outside. I'm going to Google myself.
Yeah.
And then the next one is obviously the gratitude of being grateful for what you have, for looking for the good, because you can build upon that. Why not build on a foundation of gratitude, on a foundation of enjoyment, on a foundation of what's working? Because again, what you focus on grows. And so just bringing that gratitude exercise, whether it be thinking, as you said, writing as I do, but bringing that in, that can start to build a whole different life for you just with that one movement.
And putting the emotions into the gratitude, that can make it even stronger. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like we were saying before, emotion invigorates our thoughts. It gives them more energy. And so, bringing that emotion, that's about the visualization, isn't it? Just really imagining and re-engineering or re-experiencing the feeling of gratitude and excitement and appreciation and invigorating yourself that way.
Yeah, I think that's true, Angela, because I think if you put the emotions into it, then you probably tend to think more about the picture of whatever it was. Do you know what I mean? Like you think, oh yeah, that was really good. So yeah, I think that's true. It's invigorating the emotions that then, as we know, science says that as we do that, we will start to be led to other little things. And yes, it's not going to be this real great smooth pathway all the time, but those challenges will be ones that we think, okay, that's interesting. How can I do this? And how can I move on to the next thing?
And I love that's a really important point, that this is not just a straight line. You know, our next chapters are never straight lines.
Mm.
It's always one step forward, one step back, one step sideways, two step forward. I mean, it changes all the time. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we expect or anticipate that it will be, hey, well, I'm on purpose now. Everything will just fall in my path. We have to take some detours on the way. But it seems, well, if I look back with hindsight, that's the way I like to look at it, from when I decided to let go of my marketing agency and move more into this line of work, working more specifically with women in their next chapters. If I look back, I can see the connections of, I spoke to that person, and that led to there, and that led to there. But I never could have predicted that when I was looking forward. It just wasn't possible. So that's where the trust comes in, doesn't it?
I think that's true. And I think you're right that, sometimes you were at a cafe and you overheard a conversation and said, wait a minute, I think I'm going to buy that book. And I mean, that's happened to some people. So I think you're right. Sometimes you just happen to be in the right place at the right time. And it would be one little step that at the time you think, I'll do that. And then suddenly when you look back, you think, oh, wow, that was interesting how all those things led up to this.
Yeah.
And you're right, I never could have done that as a strategic plan.
No, never.
It's just something that has, come along the way.
I mean, I'm not saying don't plan, because definitely planning is part of the journey. But it's planning. It's taking the steps. It's taking them in faith and in trust. It's putting in your best efforts, but it's letting go of the expectation of how it must be. I think we have to stay open to those possibilities that the universe can just toss our way when we're not expecting them. So it's the baby steps for sure.
Yeah, and I think there's that whole also view about you leave the how to the universe, and I've certainly found that with I set goals and I set intentions, but in terms of the strategies, I mean I'll have strategies in place, but I will really just say, okay, I'll leave it up to you. And many times things will come my way that I never could have planned, or I never could have actually gotten myself. Do you know what I mean? It just comes my way, and I think, wow, that's fantastic. I never, that's bigger than what I would have thought would have been.
That's actually a conversation that I have often. I work with the mindset coach, Larissa Halls from Everyday Inspiration. And she asked me a really telling question one day, which was, if you went back 5 years and looked forward to where you are now, doing what you're doing now, could you ever have imagined it? And it was like, no way. I mean, I had this overall feeling of the direction I wanted to go in, and I followed the feeling, but there's no way that I had the map. And where will I be in another 5 years' time? I don't have the ability to dictate that, but I'll follow the feelings. I'll follow what is that's calling me, what's interesting me, what's captivating my attention, what's raising my curiosity. And I'll take more of those steps. And I know that if I keep aligning with what feels right for me, then that destination in 5 years' time, wherever it may be, is going to feel good. I'm really confident in that. And I think that's what I'm focusing on, of being of service and being on purpose. That is the law of attraction in action to me, because I'm being attracted to and pulling things towards me that align with those real feelings and desires.
And Angela, I find that sometimes people who are discouraged, I will ask them that. I'll say, okay, because I'm starting I'm in my business and it's still not doing it. So I'll say, well, let's go back 2 years ago when you started your business. Just tell me some of the journey. And it's true. They'll say, oh, wow, back then is it, and now I've got this and I've got that. And because people, sometimes it can be really incremental steps. And so people don't realize how far they've come, because
absolutely,
I haven't gotten there. So I think that's a really good strategy to just say to people, so what, so tell me about 2 years ago. And, many times people will just be amazed at how far they've come, even though it's those little baby steps.
Yeah, that reverse gapping, because we focus so often on where it is that we're going, and we forget to turn around and take note of how far we've come.
Yes.
I'd love everyone, like if you're listening to this right now, pause, turn around and look back at how far you have come, because we have all made progress. And this is an evolution. It's not a revolution. That to me is at the core of the next chapter. You're evolving into the person that you're meant to be. You're evolving into the things that you're here to do. And it's trusting and keeping on moving forward, but never losing sight of the progress that you've made.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Evolving, even when you move into your next chapter, that next chapter may evolve. So when you first start, it may seem like, well, this is what I'm going to do. And then you evolve. I mean, when I first started my next chapter, it was pretty much fully around the law of attraction. And now that's really kind of the sideline. That's the sort of the undercurrent of what I'm doing, but that's not really the big stuff that I'm teaching. It's part of it, but there's a whole range of other stuff. And I think that's another thing that's, I think, so important to people when they go into the next chapter. If they evolve, that's okay. It doesn't mean you've done the wrong thing when you first started. It just means, okay, I've got that. I've evolved here. And, I think that's a really important point.
I think that's the whole excitement, is the fact that we're never quite sure where it's going to go. So we have to follow the emotion. So give yourself permission to explore. Give yourself permission to follow what feels good. We deserve it, goddammit.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I think some of that is giving yourself permission.
Yeah.
Because I coached a law student who wanted to be and part of it was, I don't know if I can, that's probably a bit too big. And I said, well, why? And they talk about permission. And then there was another person who is very well known in government and worked in Canberra for a while and then worked here. She wanted to be a yoga teacher. And it's so interesting, Angela, because when I have those conversations with people, it's almost like when you give them permission and then suddenly they decide they can move forward to the next step. But it's almost like, and it's not really like I'm giving them permission, but I'm actually really, and I guess in some ways when you're having that conversation with them, you're actually having them see that actually what you're actually leading to and what you're feeling, just so encouraged, motivated by, that's an okay thing to do.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people go, I don't know, So I think you're right. Giving yourself permission is one of the first steps, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And so I think that's a perfect place for us to draw this particular conversation to a close. It's follow the breadcrumbs. Give yourself permission to follow what delights you, to follow what captures your curiosity, as we've been saying so often. We don't know where it's going to end. With yourself, you went from management consultancy to law of attraction and now more into the confidence piece. It is an evolution. And with myself, from corporate marketing and sales into my own marketing agency with staff, into the confidence, the self-worth, and the marketing and mindset side of things that I do now. And I'm just going to keep on following the breadcrumbs and seeing where it ends. So I really encourage our listeners to do the same. And Linda, if to find out more about what's evolving in your world, where do we find you in this big, wide online world?
Well, probably the best thing is my website. And it's just www.lindachousis.com. And I'm going to be, I'm probably going to be changing some of the things on the website. So yeah, if people want to look at the website, there's a lot of blog posts on there which will talk about confidence and leadership and that kind of thing. So that may be worth it for some people who think, how do I move in this direction?
Absolutely. Well, I'll make sure that link is on the page in the show notes so we can find you easily. And thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it's a winding journey. It's a winding adventure that we're on. And, the reason I love to have these conversations is just to open those doors of possibility for somebody else, that we all have these when we're looking back, such diverse experiences, but we do absolutely deserve to honor those emotions, to follow what it is that is giving us that feeling of delight, because you just never know where you might end up in your next chapter.
I think that's so true, Angela. I think that's the perfect way to describe it.
I'm so pleased. Well, thanks again, Linda. And thank you guys for listening. I hope that the conversation that you're hearing today just does open that next step of possibility for you to tune into those emotions of what you're feeling, to do the contrast exercise. If you're not happy here, or if this isn't working out, what might? And then allow yourself to focus on that, to visualize that possibility, and to take the first small step towards it as you exercise and build up your own trust muscles and create this next chapter that really brings you some joy. So thanks again for your time. This is Angela Rasmus, and I'll speak with you again really soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Pop over to angelarasmus.com to subscribe to the show and leave a review. And whilst you're there, you can also enjoy valuable free resources, including show notes and downloads, along with the Next Chapter community, where you can connect with other wholehearted women on the same journey as you. We'd love to welcome and support you as your next chapter unfolds. See you next time.